Charlie Mueller, we asked him 2 years ago to please consider giving a talk about breeding Fancy Whiptail Catfish that he's had so much success with. As far as we knew, nobody in the U.S. is working with these as much as Charlie has been and has been breeding so many of them. And so we asked him to please put a talk together, and this is what he came up with, and we're happy to have him. Thank you, Charlie.
First off, I want to say I appreciate everybody getting up this early. I know there were a bunch of people still up when I went to bed last night at 1. So I just want to thank everybody here at Cataclysm. It is an absolute honor to be up here at the same spot where Jules and Eric were talking yesterday. Still kind of surreal. So what we got here, this is my experiences with breeding and just keeping some different lure carrying catfish. The whiptail types, whether they be lip brooders or egg layers. In the bottom corner here, we got the Pseudohemidon apithanos. These are the new ones that are coming out of Colombia from the Rio Caqueta. They get big. They get like 12 inches long and 3 to 4 inches across the head. They're big, skunking fish. And then we got the opposite, another lip brooder over here. This is a pistol loricario, crazy mouth structure, and they're on the opposite side. They only get about 4 inches long. Some spawns that I've had from the Loricarinae family in the last 2.5 years. The top 3 are the egg layers. They typically run like in tubes. Some of them will spawn in case needed, the Enigmani. Bottom 4 are the mouth brooders. They're the ones that probably have a lot more interest. The Pseudohemidon species per 2 and the Epistoloricario, as far as I know, I was the world first to breed them. I know that for sure with the Omation. The Peru 2, they're a little harder to discern, but we'll get to that later on. So you want to breed Loricarinaes. What's the first thing you need? Big water changes. They absolutely love big, heavy, massive water changes. Typically, a lot of them live, at least the ones I have, live in areas where there's small tributary streams that come into the big river, lots of sand, lots of heavy flow when the rain season comes. This tank actually started probably down right around the trim line. I probably did about 38 gallons of water in this water change in this 40 breeder for them. Knowing your water. I can't stress enough for these fish how important it is to know what your water parameters are, your temperatures, your pH, how variable it is, and how easy it is to control them. I use a whole house filter. I use sediment and I use 2 carbon blocks. My Pittsburgh water sucks. They hate us as fish keepers. They try to use chloramines in the water, which are atrocious for fish. They're terrible, and because they're cheap, they want to try and save their pipelines and not replace the water lines. Parameter control. Consistency is key with these guys. Whether it be, I don't talk about consistency with temperature so much as I do conductivity and water hardness. Water hardness is huge. Knowing your kh and your GH are probably the most important things for these fish. That is what a sediment filter looks like after about 2 months in my fish room. That's the new one up top. It's taken out all the heavy metals and minerals and stuff like that don't really need to be in there. pH, like I said, is 1, big one. As long as that's relatively stable, unless you're trying to spawn them and play with the pH on purpose, you're good. Hardness, again, biggest one possible. RO or DI, is it needed? I try to not use RO water as much as possible because it is a pain in the rear end. Test it. Keep your meters as close as possible, and don't take it for granted that your water is going to be the same from day to day. Infrared thermometer. I don't know if people saw me over in the vendor room. I was having issues with the heater yesterday, and they stayed on, and that's the best way to tell temperature so your fish don't get cooked. Conductivity meters, great for your TDS. pH meters. I don't put such a high. That's probably the least important water parameter for me for spawning. Medicines. This is a huge one because, especially that second one, that Cataclysm, the amount of times I've seen bacterial infections kill any type of, especially the lip brooders. I haven't had a shipment from the wild where they haven't had severe bacterial infections. Even if they look fine. They can look fine, but I still treat them just because it's not worth it. You get $100 fish and you lose 2 of them, and you could have prevented Cataclysm. Sand is the most important thing for these fish. That is the exact type of sand I use. It is extremely fine. I just put a small layer down. As you heard in Eric's talk yesterday, or maybe it was, I forget, or Jules', they were talking about the color of the sand from the wild. I prefer a light sand. I do not like the heavy, darker sands, because that's what they like to do. They'll bury themselves completely, and maybe you'll even see just the eyeballs sticking out. Additives for spawning, ways to control the water again. There's 2 different kinds. There's organic, which are alder cones, oak leaves. I don't use Indian almond leaves. Oak leaves are easier for me to get a hold of, and they last a little longer. They don't break down as fast. Rooibos tea. That's a big one that I know some discus and ultimangel people use, but you go to plecos or catfish any kind, people kind of look at me like I'm crazy when I say I put tea in my tank. That has no caffeine. It doesn't affect the pH. It actually only adds some fluvic acids, which are usually the harder ones. We can usually get humic acids from a lot of the other things that we use. And then there's synthetic. Discus trace, NRO right. I talked about not using RO that much. That doesn't mean that I don't make my water harder to seam for a dry season. I will do that artificially by using these additives to raise the amount of minerals and conductivity in the water for that. Organic additives, how do you get them? Well, you can either buy them on Aquabid, or you go out collecting and find them. These were ones from about 2 weeks ago. We were on vacation, and they're green. They're not ready yet. That's what they look like when they're ready. They're nice and brown. That's the added bonuses of collecting where these alder cone lives. You get to go fishing a lot of times. And that's my girlfriend's first pike. I give her a lot of credit for putting up with me and dealing with everything, with all the fish. So, dietary needs. Variety of quality foods. That cannot be stressed enough. Live foods are huge. You don't have to feed them every day. You don't have to feed them once a month even. But when you're trying to get the fish, when you want to put them in that season and try to start spawning them, hit them with live foods. And even if the live foods like baby brine shrimp look too small for a 10-inch fish, stick them in there. It's going to help you. Rapashi gel foods. That is a huge food that is amazing for fry. I know I work 10, 12 hours a day sometimes. I'm gone a while. I can't be home to feed small fry constantly. That goes in the tank. That usually lasts me all day while I'm at work. And I'll throw a cube in when I get home at night, and that's the 24 hours covered right there, and they can graze all day long. High quality prepared stick food. I use yourfishstuff.com. The ingredients are awesome. It's very limited, and the numbers of what you want, the percentage-wise, is perfect. Blackworm and his blackworm sticks, I think, is ingredient number 2. So there's a lot of them going in there. Sarah catfish chips. Hikari massivore, that's for the big, heavy meat eaters. It's a fantastic food in itself. Cobalt foods, great for any algae eaters. Sacrifices must be made sometimes. Before my fish room went up, this was just a beer fridge. Now there's a little bit of beer here, a little tucked in behind the big tubs, and a little tucked in there. You gotta choose what's important sometimes. Epistoloric area omation. These are a crazy looking fish that Ted Judy got in a couple years ago. I saw them the night I was going to my fish club meeting, and I was like, I have to order these fish. I literally saw them 5 minutes after I looked at his list after I got there, and I emailed him like, Ted, how many do you have? I want them all. That's the male. You can see his nice straight taper the whole way. His pectoral fins are actually pretty long, elongated. They look like little airplane wings actually when you look at them from above. That's the females. You can see how they round out. They look like they swallowed like a big shooter marble in comparison to the males. That's the crazy mouth structure that I was talking about with these guys. Their filaments are just unreal. Across the head as adults from tip of barbel to tip of barbel, they're probably 3.5 inches, and it's only a 4 or 5 inch fish. Breeding attempts. That's a female from the side. Again, they look like they just swallowed a marble. They look so obese, it's unbelievable because it's such a small fish. 82 to 72 degrees. So 82 is relatively where my fish room kept the temperature on this tank during the winter time when they spawn. Because I have a heater in there, or just the house heat, and the pleco tanks keep the room warm. pH 6.5. That can vary anywhere from 6 to 7. Sand substrate, few oak leaves. I didn't have any other decorations in the tank, just a mat and filter, and then a few little natural debris. 18 days of straight 40% or better water changes is what I was putting towards these fish. Each day I would see more and more courtship happening. This fish is a pain in the rear end because I don't know of any other fish where the female will literally hound the male to spawn. It is the hardest thing getting the male to want to spawn. She'll chase him for hours in the morning after the light goes on. And then finally, on day 19, I woke up to him holding the eggs. He was very protective. He always liked to stay in the far corner, and I was too worried to try to net him out or to take a great picture or anything like that. So unfortunately, my pictures of him holding aren't the best. You can see from that first picture they were kind of yellow. 6 days later, all fertile, they turn orange. Developing pretty well, you can see the fry start to form in there, and they look crazy like the parrots just from the minute that they're hatched. They're pretty big as far as these guys go. 12 millimeters at hatching, to me, that's a big fish when they first hatch. The problem with these fry is unless you keep a lot of water pressure on them, they want to do that right there, no matter what, all day, 24/7. They stay at the top, they want to feed from the top, they don't want to go to the bottom and sit down. Here's some examples of that. Again, 2 of them sitting at the top, 4 of them sitting at the top, trying to feed, 4 more sitting at the top. And it's very unusual because I had to sit there and I'm like, what do I feed a catfish that is trying to swim at the top of the water column that doesn't go where it wants to, that it belongs in nature on the bottom? I used ceramicron powder to feed these fish. I fed them every chance I got. I fed them when I woke up. I fed them after I took my shower before I left for work. They were probably getting food 6 to 8 times a day. They grow extremely fast. The picture to the right this is the adult female. That's one of the F1s at 6 months old. So you can see it's pretty much half the size, the length. It's still got a little bit of girth to put on. But at 10 months, they were literally the exact same size as the adults.
When you're growing them, how often did you change the water?
3 times a week. But there were 4 fish, 4 adults, and the 6 fry that made it in a 40-gallon. That fish, I've never met a fish that also likes to try to kill itself in as many ways as possible. They try to jump out of the tank. I had one that I found dried on the floor almost. I threw him in a tub. He was half dried, his back half healed, thankfully. They'll go, the males for refuge when the females were hunting them. I had some Ancestors Claro in there at first. Tiny little 1-inch round caves. They'll jam themselves all the way in the back of the cave. And evolution hasn't treated them well. They don't know how to walk backwards. So they walk on their fins to go forward in the cave, and then they kill themselves because they can't get out. Hemiloricariumarii. These are a neat one that I got from CatCon last year from Ian Fuller of Go Wild Peru. It's very hard to take a picture of a male on eggs in a 10-inch tube. I have no idea how to do that properly yet and get a good picture out of it. But you can see the eggs right there. They're actually all down here, all under him. He's kicked a couple out, so I put them in a cobalt egg tumbler. Best things I've found for keeping the eggs alive. Ready to hatch. You can see they've all the brown in them. They've started forming. They're probably 10 hours away from hatching right there. that is one of the best things I have found to do. If you have any whiptail fry whatsoever, as soon as they hatch, I will put seasoned oak leaves and then take a sponge from another tank and squeeze all that debris and detritus into their container. What happens as it all settles in, it starts to stick to those leaves, and it forms like Jules was talking about, those off-wax layers, those massive biofilm layers. I don't know what's special about the way oak leaves react with this detritus, but it turns into the slimiest, grossest leaf you'll ever feel in your life. But what happens, this is a piece of wood, you got 2 fry on it. This is a leaf that's maybe the size of a nickel. There's a dozen fry sitting on the leaf, grazing all day long, because the wood just does not create the same biolayer. That's a better close-up picture of them. You can see they're just, they can't get out of each other's way even, but they're just grazing all day long. These are the tiniest fry I have dealt with from a catfish on day 1. They're a whopping 6-7 millimeters, and their body isn't even as thick as the dash on the centimeter lines. That's them on 913. You can actually see there's a bunch up on the leaves. They're kind of hard to, they blend in just like the picture from Jules' talk last night. Occasionally when they get real hungry, they will come down. I just fed them golden pearls, so. Hemiloricariat agamani. This is a catfish. This is probably one of the most commonly imported just as a whiptail catfish. Open end tubes, or even after a while, they will even spawn in caves. I have never had luck spawning any type of whiptails, egg layers in clear tubes. Every tube I've used has always been either solid PVC or clay caves from Lake Pleco caves. They're omnivorous. They're absolutely massively tolerant of any pH change. You can put these guys down to in the 4.5 range, or you can keep them up at 7.5, and they don't care, and they'll still spawn and be happy. Temperature values on these guys like it ideally in the mid to low 70s. There's a PVC tube. Male guards them. He sits on them all day long, just uses his mouth to pat over the eggs. If you want to take them away, you can. You can see you got one egg starting to go bad here. I usually stuck an air stone in here, and I would prop the front end of the cave up with a rock under it so that the airflow goes up and out, but the air doesn't directly touch the eggs. It just moves all the water around. You can see the one bad egg, it turned yellow, it started fungus a little bit. Take a little pipette, just suck all the junk out of the egg, and then that little extra fungus doesn't really make a difference because it has nothing to chew on or grow and spread to the other eggs. You can see even on hatching day, it's the one egg that, the shell's still there, but all the junk and a little bit of fungus is all gone. These guys are a lot easier to deal with. They're bigger as fry. They're a little more active. They hunt food a little better than the Moroi. I had these guys before I learned the oak leaf trick. So what I actually did was I kept these in a little plastic shoebox, and in the morning before work, as soon as I got home, and then right before I would go to bed, I would actually feed them live brine shrimp or microworms, and then about half an hour after feeding, I would change all the water in the tote because just all the food started to die and it was just too much to keep up with the bioload. I moved them after about a week to a 2.5 when I was doing that tote. They got heavy water changes again. I like to put all my fry at least 3 times a week, 40% water changes. You just get way better growth out of them. You can take them from hatching to 2.25 inches in a month and a half for most of these guys. Now we can start getting a little interesting. This is where it gets fun. We're starting to get towards the lip brooders here. These are the first ones that I spawned. The one on the right was my wild male, and that was the morning that I first woke up and saw him holding. And then the one on the left is actually a F1 from them. He's a little smaller, but you can still see how big the egg clutch is on these guys. The neat thing about them is the male's lips will actually grow a little bit bigger. You'll see a visual section of dimorphism in them when they want to spawn. But I still have no idea how their lips get as big as they do to wrap all the way around one of these egg clutches, because they don't look like they'd even be closed. It expands like 4 to 5 times their skin does. Extremely susceptible to those bacterial infections again. It's unbelievable. You'll just start seeing them be a little lazy. They'll keep their head up a little bit. And then if you don't treat it that day like that, then the next day you'll start seeing down on their body or around their tail where they'll have red. It'll be almost like hemorrhaging. I know Corey guys see it a lot with red blotch disease. I treat all of my wild fish with Cataclysm. It doesn't matter. That's one of the things that I can't stress enough. If you get them in there straight from the wild, put them on Cataclysm. Treat them for that bacterial infection. Keeping the pH down helps. Keeping the temperature down on it also helps. These guys liked it a little lower on the pH for spawning. They really liked it once I got below 6. When I got below 6 is when I saw that I had the least amount of egg die-off, the best hatch ratios, and actually the best growth out of my fry. They're also neat because there's he'll hold that big cluster, and this was my good male. He kept about 4 dozen eggs per spawn that he would hold until hatching time. The other male that I had that was bigger than him by ½ an inch would only keep about 18 eggs. I'm like, I don't understand that because you're bigger. He just wasn't comfortable enough holding them. Or he was just hungry and liked the taste of them. 9 days holding, again, you can see how large their lips grow. The cluster got chewed down a little because you can't see any loose eggs. All you see is lips. Even smaller. This was the jerk male that only liked to have 18 eggs. That was kind of neat because I thought that he would eat everyone, and then one day I just found one looking at me, and I'm like, I took the picture because I'm like, it's like it's staring right back at me. That was that little guy that just hatched. He hatched before everybody else. He didn't make it. He hatched like 2 days ahead of everybody else. So that might have been why the male picked him. I don't know.
Did you transfer that fish to a smaller container?
They were. That was a marina hang-on box. I don't do that anymore. That is more of a pain, and I haven't found it to be worthwhile enough for this species at least. There are a few species later on where you'll see that I still prefer to do that with, just because I can keep the food in smaller quarters, feed the fry more.
Don't have any trouble with dropping the eggs?
I never have. But the tank that I did the best with them in, painted on 3 sides, had sand, and it was just a sponge filter in it. I had my 6 wild adults in a tent. They're one of the laziest fish in the world. They hide all day, and even when you're going to feed them, so for my wild adults, only took baby brine shrimp for the first 6 months that I had them. They wouldn't touch anything else. But what was neat was when they would feel the baby brine shrimp start hitting them, they would start moving their head in a half-moon pattern and digging up sand, and they would create about a 3/4 inch deep pit. And they would just move their head along the pit as the baby brine shrimp just collected in it. So they didn't have to move and hunt food. The food literally just came right to them. Adaptation. It's intelligent or complete laziness at its finest. After 2.5 weeks old, this is when they get past the most fragile state. This is also the state at which, if you haven't fed them enough up to this point, you will start seeing massive die-offs. You'll see two one day, 3 the next, 4 the next, and within a week, your whole clutch will be gone.
Is it too late to save them by then, or if you
Yes,
get captured?
yes, it's too late to do anything by then. All the damage has been done. They just never formed all that good gut fauna to process and keep everything going. So your comment about moving in the breeder box, this is why I did. This is why I quit that. Because I left with one clutch go because I had 2 males holding at once, and I didn't want to put 2 males in one of those hang-on boxes. And I actually found out that they did better, and I could just overfeed the tank more. The adults did better. Granted, I had to keep up on water changes for it. I was doing 4 water changes a week on this tank to keep up with it, but so much easier. Loricaria affinis similima. These are about 7 to 8 inch wild fish that I got as a group. The males hold a very large raft under them. The eggs are laid in one single flat raft, just like a pseudohemiodon species almost. They need a lot of floor space. I had mine in a 40 breeder that had nothing else in it but just sand and a couple pieces of leaves. If you put them in a smaller tank, they just won't spawn. You can condition them. They need space to perform their courtship and spawn. I call these ones similima. They're very similar to Jeremy Bash's Rio Atabapo, the crying whiptails. One of the largest differences, there's differences in the fry, but all Jeremy's spawns always have eggs stacked on top of each other. There's multiple layers to the eggs. It's kind of hard to see here. You can see this one sitting right on top a little bit. Then you can see they're kind of smushed around a lot more here. Never, out of all the spawns I had with these guys, did I ever have one egg stacked on top. It was always just a flat raft. That's what it looks like underneath. You can see he's actually clenching his barbels around it. They don't have the greatest hold of it, so you can easily pick them up and just, as long as you're gentle with the eggs, just pull them right away, and he goes back to, he gets pissed off and runs around the tank looking for his eggs, but after about 30 seconds of that, he gets tired. These guys like it warm. 82, 84 degrees. Floor space, again, for this species, can't stress that one enough. Eggs hatched in 10 to 12 days, depending on if it was 82 or 84. This was a picture of where I moved the eggs right after I took them from him in the previous photo. As soon as they hit the water, they came out of the water and hit the water again, they just started hatching all over the place. It's kind of neat because when you look at them, this was one of the first pictures I took with a little macro lens. You don't think that a fish that's 10 millimeters can fit in an egg that's like 4. It's crazy to see them come out like that. And they all happen at once. This is them getting ready to eat for the first time. There's a bunch of them in there. I do always like to keep sand in my containers just because it tries to fight off. It keeps that bacteria growing on the bottom a little bit less. Sometimes I've had issues where the fry will get little pink bellies from bacteria that's growing, something's irritating them, and it kills them. They take baby brine shrimp, microworms. These guys are a lot easier to raise because they're just bigger fry. They hunt food better. You can see the difference here. 2-week-old, it's freshly hatched, probably about 3 times the size. These guys grow incredibly fast, and they have a different pattern as they grow out. Some of them turn all black. Some of them look exactly like the parents. Some of them are kind of a mix in between. I assume it's just to help for camouflage in the wild. I've never had the opportunity to go collect these fish, so. These are one of the coolest ones that I own. They're a big, honking fish. These only started appearing within the last 2 years. We're referring to these as Pseudohemiodon CF apithanos. I put real because these are probably, based on the description, they fit it better than those little black and white chameleon whiptails. Because in the paper it refers to the fish looking similar to a Pseudohemiodon laticeps. And laticeps is a very large reticulated pattern. It doesn't have the solid colors like the little chameleons do. These guys, I was at work one day, and I had a little time to kill at lunch. I was looking on Facebook, and I saw Seagrist actually had them posted. I texted my buddy who I know can get from Seagrist, and I was like, call me as soon as you possibly can. I want these fish. He's like, I'm at work. I'm like, I don't care. If you want more stuff from me, you have to call me right now. This has to get done. So he's like, all right, 10 minutes, I'm going to lunch. I'm like, don't make it 15. And he called me, and I'm like, I couldn't shut up. I was like, you have to get a hold of them. You have to get these fish. I don't care what they cost. I want up to a dozen. He's like, he calls me back 5 minutes later. He's like, they said they got 5. He told me the price. I'm like, I don't care, whatever. That's what they're paying for them over in the UK at that time. So I was like, give them to me. And I was so desperate for these fish. They sent them the next day. So I got them on, that was a Wednesday. I got them on Thursday morning. I stayed up till 3 a.m. after picking these fish up from the airport and acclimating them to wake up at 5 for work. They're really awesome looking fish. They have this network pattern in them, and they change. Sometimes this guy will be all black. Sometimes there'll be no black in them at all. This is a close-up of one. You see a few little areas here that are a lot lighter in color. They kind of just look a little washed out. That's where all those bacterial infections are. These guys were a pain in the rear end to get adjusted to aquarium life. For about 2 weeks after I got these guys, I was treating the tank with Cataclysm, and then every day I was taking out the 2 worst ones and taking them over to the sink, holding them over the sink, and putting hydrogen peroxide on the areas that were affected the most. But when you get to see them in the tank and they're all settled in and you got 3 different colors of them and they're all lined up, it's kind of freaking cool. That is the hardest color to find from what I understand. This red form is it's a reddish brown. They look absolutely awesome when he's not buried in the tank and stuff like that. It's crazy. I'll sit there and look, I'll stop, walk by the tank and some feed and other stuff, and I'll stop and I'm like, wow, you're out for once instead of burying your head in the sand and there's no food in the tank. That's rare. Again, they absolutely need sand substrate to bury themselves in. You'll see them all the time. You might not even see any. You'll be like, what happened to my fish? And then you'll start looking closer and you barely see an eyeball. And then you'll see an eyeball over here. And you're like, how does a 10-inch fish that's 3 inches wide hide in an inch and a half of sand and just disappear completely? That's him out, hanging out a little bit. They're just awesome little guys. These were another one that I got from Ted. It made me real sad when Ted stopped bringing stuff in because he was one of the best guys to have around for oddball whiptails. It was unbelievable. These guys, enormous eggs for this fish. This is a 5-inch long fish, but he's not very wide. He's maybe an inch at his widest, maybe 1.25 inches. These eggs were 6 millimeters. Bigger than most plego eggs even. That was unreal to me to see how large, how he's even able to handle them with this small mouth. Real warm for these guys at spawning. 85. pH was 6.0. It was a 20-gallon long. Again, you have 4 fish that are only 4 or 5 inches. They don't move around a lot. As long as you leave the tank open, just sand, some leaves. Tons of room for them. You may also notice one thing in some of my pictures. You'll see this red stuff over here. Swiss Tropical Sport Foam. Every one of my tanks has port foam, has a mat filter in it. If I want to add extra current to it, I'll put in circulation pumps or hang on the back filters just to get that extra weird flow to change it up sometimes for spawning. 2 males, 2 females, and I had one little contaminant in these guys. The contaminant, I assumed, was a Suhemidon lamina. You'll see that guy coming up. I call it my little frog fish because his eyes just bulged out like a frog, and he just reminded me of a frog when he was buried in the sand. 12 days to hatching. that seems to be a pretty common number a lot of times. It usually is about 2 to 3 weeks usually for most of these fish. Day 5, he never moved from that spot. He would just bury the eggs in the sand. How he was able to manage to bury the eggs but not himself at all, I'd still like to know that one. It's real hard to see, but they are right there. You got a little bit better view. I annoyed him enough so that he brought him out.
Did he stay still, or did he sit there and keep bobbing his head?
He stayed still. He never bobbed his head to like fan him or anything like that. No, no. Like I said, he's the most stubborn out of anything. He just acted like he was dead the whole time he was carrying eggs. I could pick him up and just drop him, and he would just fall right down. We had one hatch early. I assumed that this was when I was trying to move him around and get a picture. He bumped a rock. And that little guy right there, that looks like a rock with a tiny little tail, is the fry. I had issues with these guys for that spawn like that, because I assume they need absolute RO water for the eggs to hatch properly. I had to actually take the spawn away from the dad and take a little fine paintbrush, like a watercolor set paintbrush you buy for your kids, and just use one of those and rub it over once, and then the eggs hatch right away. Two days after hatching, they look just like that. They're a very small version of their parents already. You can see the pattern starting to come in. And again, another species where they kick 2 to 3 colors as fry, just for camouflage in the wild. 2 months old, it's a little hard to see. So this one starts right here, a little before the 5 centimeter mark, and then it comes back to about 8.5. These guys grew pretty slow to that point, and then after 2 months, from month 2 to month 5, they just shot out like rockets. They probably doubled their size from month 2 to 5.
Question about the colors.
Yeah.
So the fry have different colors, I get that, and I know they also change colors. Is there any long-term permanent difference in color pattern? If the fry is dark, will it be a darker and darker?
No, it doesn't matter at all. On these guys aren't one of those ones that change. These aren't those Apithanos. These guys just have a set pattern.
So then they just fade back to normal color?
They'll turn out just like that.
Okay.
Regardless of if they're dark, light. I even had some come out that were just pure white. They had no pink on them at all. After about 3 months, that's what they looked like. That's why I attribute it to just being a camouflage thing growing up. They figured whatever you're going to end up on, whether you be on, like, I'd say this guy has a better chance on the light sand in the wild. If this guy's in any wood or leaf litter or rocks, he's got a better chance than this guy being there. At 4 months old, they were already 3.5 inches. That's why I said they just put on so much weight between month 2 and 4. And not just length, even body mass. It was unbelievable to me how fast they shot up like that. So these guys grew about as fast as the epistolaric areomation. At 10 months, they were the same exact size of the adults. This is that Pseudohemidon lamina, the little frog-eye contaminant. He's a lot flatter in comparison. His fin structure is a little different. And he got big, honking, bulky eyes. It's really hard to tell here, but they just stuck out like a sore thumb. He couldn't hide at all, no matter where he was. He's a little bigger. He's about 6 inches compared to the other ones. And that's all for today.
Do you find that these guys are ready to eat pretty much upon hatching, or do they have to absorb their yolk sac for a few days, or is it kind of?
I typically let them absorb the. I treat them just like a Cory. When you start seeing the pigments start to form a little bit after that yolk sac goes down, that's when I'll start getting them with food. Depending on the size of the fish, like those Hemilurcaria marii, those 6 millimeter ones, I think it was like 24 hours. Like I started feeding them the next day just because I didn't trust. They're so small. But like, so those Pseudohemidon, the species Peru 2, those last ones, It took 4 days for them to fully absorb their yolk sac from when they should have properly hatched to start feeding. That's also why I keep the oak leaves in there and make those oak leaves at first, because even if I'm delaying, they're starting to get all that bacteria, the little microorganism bacteria and all that gut load without me feeding them. Any other questions? Thank you very much for those.